Good morning, sports fans. Coach Carroll here with SportsBanter38, and today is the day we will be doing the preview on the SEC. This will be a little bit longer video. I'm going to go a little more in detail for each team. I've got my Athlon magazine here for a guideline to each team, and I know that a lot of people will be more interested in this one just because this is the part of the country I live in. This is SEC country, and we're going to go through pretty much each and every team. Like I said, I'm going to go through a little bit on their rosters. We're going to look at their schedules and different things like that. But I got all the information here that I need to do this video, and we're going to see what we got, starting with the SEC East, and I'm going to go to the West. And before I get started, please subscribe to this channel and like and share the videos if you like what you see. That way we can get some good discussion going on this college football preview. And tomorrow I will be putting up the video for my playoff picks and who I believe will win each round and who will be the eventual champ. Like I said, we could get some good discussion going. And without further ado, it's going to be a little bit more lengthy of a video than the other conferences for the reason I stated. But we're going to get started on this, and we're going to start with the SEC East. And starting off, we got last place. And yes, Vandy is going to land back where they belong, at the bottom of the SEC East. No offense, Vandy fans. I don't have anything against Vandy, and it was probably a low blow saying they belong there, but they've been there quite a bit, and that is the truth. Having said that, looking at what they have coming back, they've got 7 offensive starters coming back, but only 4 defensive. They're usually better on the defensive side of the ball, but we don't know if that's going to be the case this year. Some of their key losses from last year, we have Ralph Webb. He's, of course, the all-time leading rusher at Vanderbilt, so that's a big blow. Trent Sheffield, a wide receiver. On the defensive side, Oren Burks, good versatile linebacker, and Ryan White, and so losing a little bit on the defensive line as well. However, some of the pieces they're bringing back is actually not too bad. Of course, Kyle Shermer at quarterback. I believe he's a legitimate quarterback in the SEC. I feel like he would be pretty good on any other team, if you ask me. They're bringing back Jawan Williams, cornerback. He's a former 4-star recruit. He's a good player. And to replace Ralph Webb, I actually feel like they've got a pretty good player coming up in Keyshawn Vaughn. I believe he had to set out last year due to transfer, but I know as a true freshman he rushed for over 700 yards and averaged almost 5 yards a carry at Illinois. And then of course he's from Pearl Con High School in Nashville, and he transferred to Vanderbilt. I feel like that's a really good pickup for Vanderbilt there. Looking at some of the other returners on offense, they got Jared Pickney at tight end. They've got 4 out of the 5 offensive linemen returning. So that's pretty good. They got Keyshawn Vaughn, and then they got a pretty decent offensive line coming back as well with Sherman, so they should be pretty good offensively. Then again, they've only got 4 coming back on defense, and I personally believe that's probably where they're going to struggle the most. And I'm going to go ahead and take a look at Vanderbilt's schedule real quick. They got Middle Tennessee. I believe they'll beat Middle Tennessee. They should beat Nevada. Then they're going to be at Notre Dame. That's probably a loss. Back to the Middle Tennessee game. I'm picking them to win, but stock still at quarterback's really tough at Middle Tennessee State University. That's by no means a gimme. They do have them at home. they have SEC athletes against, say, a mid-major, which is, I'd consider Middle Tennessee a mid-major team. I'm pretty sure that's what they are, but they should win that game. But I believe they're going to have to outscore them because I believe Stockstill's going to put some points up at quarterback there at Middle Tennessee. He's a really good player. Like I said, I believe they're going to lose at Notre Dame. I believe they'll lose at South Carolina. They'll beat Tennessee State. They're going to lose at Georgia. They're going to lose to Florida. They're going to lose to Kentucky. Arkansas. They're at Arkansas. They'll probably lose that game. They'll lose to Missouri. Missouri is going to be able to score way too many points. Ole Miss. That's another hard one. I don't know. They got Ole Miss at home. You know what? I'm going to give them that one. I'm going to say they beat Ole Miss at home. It's going to be their one SEC win. And then they have Tennessee at home. I believe they will lose this time to Tennessee. I feel like Tennessee just has more talent. And by that time of the year, I believe they'll be playing pretty good ball. So, let's see. They got 1, 2, boop, 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 boop. Three, maybe 4 wins. I don't see a big year for Vanderbilt. And hey, that's kind of where it sits at the moment. I got them winning out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, they got them finished 7th out of 7 basically. So moving up, we're going to go to Kentucky. Kentucky will be the next team in the East. They're returning 7 offensive starters and 8 defensive starters, which is good. But they are losing their quarterback, Steven Johnson, and Terry Wilson, a sophomore, looks to be the one stepping up and taking that over. They do have a good running back in Benny Snell. They seem to be in the same boat as Vandy in that looks like they have 4 out of the 5 starting offensive linemen, as well as their tight end coming back. So they should have a pretty decent foundation. Looking at them on defense with 8 returners, they're losing a little bit out of the middle of that defense. Nose guard, defensive end, offensive outside linebacker, middle linebacker. But they've got pretty much their entire defensive backfield coming back. They were not great last year on defense, so maybe they'll be a little better this year. Good enough to at least, I say, beat Vanderbilt and at least get ahead of them in the East. Like I said, Benny Snell is the first running back in program history to rush for at least 1,000 yards in consecutive seasons. He could possibly make it 3. He is a good player. He's a really good, versatile back. I really like Snell. Let's see. Some of the guys are losing. Kyle Meadows at offensive tackle started 35 consecutive games. That's going to be a pretty big loss. But with most of their line coming back, they should be okay there. Linebacker was their team captain, Courtney Love. That's going to be a big loss. Garrett Johnson, he's one of the better receivers they've had in the program's history. So they're losing a little bit, but they've actually got quite a bit coming back, which I believe should at least put them in, second to last. That's not saying a lot, but Kentucky traditionally hasn't been very great. So it pretty much it is what it is when you talk about Kentucky. Now, looking at their schedule, Central Michigan, they should win that. They'll lose to Florida. They should beat Murray State. They'll lose to Mississippi State. I believe they will lose to South Carolina. They'll lose. Let's see. They'll lose to Texas A&M. I believe they beat Vanderbilt. They'll lose to Missouri. They'll lose to Georgia. I believe Tennessee's going to get them. I'm going to say they beat Middle Tennessee. And the Louisville game is always a toss-up. I don't see a whole lot out of Louisville this year. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and give Kentucky that game. I'm going to go ahead and pick them to win that game. It is at Louisville, but it's inside the state of Kentucky. So, I mean, it's all home territory as far as I'm concerned. 5 games, I believe, and we'll see how that goes. Then we're going to move up, and this is going to be a little surprise. There's a lot of people who are really big on this team. I, however, am not one of them. They should be okay, but I don't believe they're going to be contending for the East necessarily. But I've got South Carolina coming in third from the bottom in the East. Looking at their returning players, they've got 8 back on offense, and they've got 5 back on defense. Of course, Muschamp there. He's done a pretty good job at South Carolina. Can't take anything away from him. They have Jake Bentley coming back, the junior quarterback. He started the last 20 games, and he basically threw every pass for the Gamecocks in 2017. He had about 2,800 yards passing, 18 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions, which isn't bad for SEC play. It's usually premier defensive league, and a lot of really good defensive athletes, specifically on the defensive line. So you got to give them credit for that. Some of their losses, he's losing his tight end Hayden Hurst, Saki Moore, the linebacker, Chris Lemons, defensive back, Taylor Stallworth, defensive tackle, and DJ Smith, the safety. All pretty good players. But on offense, he's basically got most of it. 2 out of the 3 starting receivers from last year. Looks like they've lost all but they got 3 out of the 5 offensive linemen, so that's not too bad. Of course, Jake Bentley is back. And although they've got depth, they got okay depth. They look like they've got okay talent. They don't seem to be necessarily a bad team, but I'm not completely sold. They're not explosive. Nothing really jumps off the chart to me when looking at South Carolina, but we're going to see what they got this year. I'm just going to go ahead and go down their schedule. Coastal Carolina, I'm going to say they win that one. They got Georgia at home September 8th. That's one to keep an eye on because a lot of the analysts around the country believe that this is a trap game for Georgia. They believe Georgia will lose this game. I, on the other hand, am not one of those people. I believe Georgia will go into South Carolina, and I believe that they will absolutely tear them apart. I'm saying 2 or 3 score, and I might be on the low end. It might even be more than that. I just feel like Georgia's a lot better. I don't feel like it's a trap game. I feel like South Carolina's going to really take it to Georgia. So, that's 1-1 right there. Marshall at home the next week. That's a game they should win. They go to Vanderbilt. I believe they'll beat Vanderbilt. I believe they beat Kentucky at Kentucky. Missouri, I believe, is going to outscore them. I believe they lose that game. A&M is kind of like I'm on the fence about A&M about everybody because the drama that's going on down there with Jimbo Fisher. Not going to get into all that, but I know that's affecting the team. It's going to affect the team on the field. I mean, let's just be honest about that. Tennessee, now, since I got them below Tennessee, I'm going to go ahead and talk about this. I believe Tennessee is going to beat at least one SEC team that they're not supposed to. I believe they're supposed to beat Kentucky and Vandy. But in addition to that, I believe South Carolina, because it was out of South Carolina and Missouri, and Missouri's offense is extremely good. So I do not believe that they may be able to keep up scoring-wise with Missouri. I'm not sure yet because we don't know a lot about Tennessee. But I believe they can sneak a win out of South Carolina, even if it's on the road. like I said, I feel like South Carolina and Tennessee are kind of right there with each other. Even though South Carolina had a better year last year, I believe Tennessee can go in there and get an upset. Next week at Ole Miss, I think Ole Miss is pretty down. So for that reason, I'm going to pick South Carolina to beat Ole Miss. I believe South Carolina on the road at Florida. I don't know. See, I don't know about that game. That's another one. I guess I'm going to go ahead and pick Florida to win that game just because of how it's setting up. But it's kind of hard to say. They should beat Chattanooga, and they go to Clemson the last regular season game. I don't care if it's a rivalry; they're not going to beat Clemson. Clemson, in my estimation, early on especially, is probably the best team in the country. So let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It looks like they're going to be around six wins. Looks like Athlon's got them picked for 7, so they'll probably make a bowl game. So that's something anyway. Okay, and we're going to move on up. Of course, the next team is Tennessee Volunteers. Now, there's a lot of uncertainty about this team because they have a new coach in place. Of course, they lost. They replaced Butch Jones, which in a lot of Tennessee fans' eyes, that's a huge deal. Just real quick, my personal view on Butch Jones. I felt like he made the team better. He brought in good players. He recruited well. The problems was he didn't keep all of those recruits. A whole bunch of them ended up transferring or leaving the program for whatever reason. The ones that did stay did not always get developed properly. And thirdly, some of the guys that he brought in, although highly rated good players, did not necessarily make sense. For example, Quentin Dormady, in a lot of people's eyes, he's terrible. Me personally, I don't believe he's terrible. I believe he's a good player. He was deserving of his 4-star rating. The problem was he was brought into an offense that did not fit his skill set, and it showed on the field. It didn't work. He wasn't a read option quarterback, which bringing him in did not make any sense as far as what style of offense the team runs. Now he's transferred to Houston, and he'll probably get at least one or two good years of starting at Houston. Now watch him go there and have at least one good season. And I mean, it happened a lot under Butch Jones. Quarterbacks will transfer and they'll have great seasons at other spots. So we're going to wait and see how that goes. Anyway, back to Tennessee this year. They have 4 returning on offense, 6 returning on defense. The talent level, they've got some young guys coming in and starting on this offensive line. The deal is they've actually got some good talent across the board. The problem being a lot of these guys have not properly been developed. Now we have Jeremy Pruitt coming in. He's been under the tutelage of Nick Saban, the best in the business. Now, that doesn't guarantee anything. We don't know if Jeremy Pruitt's going to come in and be the next Kirby Smart with what Kirby Smart's doing at Georgia, or if he's going to completely flop at Tennessee. That is yet to be seen. I'm not going to sit here and say with, rose-colored, blinds on that Tennessee's going to be great under Jeremy Pruitt. Based on what I've seen, I believe they're going to be better. As a Tennessee fan, they have my support, but I'm not getting optimistic and jumping all on the bandwagon and like, oh, Tennessee's going to be great under Jeremy Pruitt. We're back. You hear that every year. I'll get excited when they give me something to get excited about. And this is nothing against people. It's just when Butch Jones was there, when he farted, it was like he farted a cloud of orange dust with orange little crystals in it. And I'm not gonna put Jeremy Pruitt on that pedestal and say everything he's doing is just wonderful, and it looks good on paper, and from afar looking at what they're doing, it looks like, oh, this man knows what he's doing, this is going to work. Let's wait and see. I'm not going to judge him too harshly this year, even if they do worse than what I have him projected to do, because I'm going to give him 2 to 3 years. Let him get some of his talent in there. One of the things that he's addressing is he feels like the injury problems were because of they're just small. That apparently, although some good talent was coming in the last few years, there was not a lot of size recruited, and he believes that attributed a lot to the injury problems that they've had, which, to his credit, this year so far, we have not been hearing a whole lot about injuries, with the exception of Trey Smith, which was basically, a blood clot issue that had nothing to do with conditioning or anything else. That was just one of those things that just happens that you cannot help, which is a big one because Trey Smith is the best player on the Vols roster. He's more than likely a future top 5 draft pick in the NFL, if at the very worst, the top 10. He's a very talented player. But like I said, we're going to take a look at Jawan Jennings will be back this year. That's a big one. On defense, Nigel Warrior may be the most talented guy that they have. Daniel Batuli at middle linebacker. He fits that mold as one of those big linebackers. With Jeremy Pruitt coming from defensive coordinator at Alabama, that's the type of guys he had at linebacker at that school, and it worked really well with his system. Darian Kirkland's another one. He's about 235, but he's a very fast linebacker. Barring his health, he's had injury issues his whole career. If he can stay healthy, that's going to be big. On defense, they've got talent in the defensive backfield. Anchored by Nigel Warrior, of course, and then of course you got Todd Kelly Jr. He'll be a senior this year. He's a good hard-nosed safety, but early on they're going to have some issues, I believe, because they're learning a new defense and the team chemistry that early may not be there. So it's going to take some time. I think a large part of this is going to lie on the shoulders of Kyle Phillips, who is a senior this year. He has had some issues with injuries and whatnot in the past, but he is, if I can recall a player in the early days that he kind of reminds me of, he's somewhat of a Todd Kelly, basically Todd Kelly Jr.'s father, who was the defensive end at Tennessee, very good pass rusher. Kyle Phillips fits that mold. Now, he's not Todd Kelly, because Todd Kelly had a wonderful career at Tennessee. Kyle Phillips has not yet reached his potential. I believe he can be a good pass rusher, and I feel like that is huge, especially like in Game 1 against West Virginia. If they can get pressure on the quarterback, it gives them a lot better chance. Now, real quick on the offense, quarterback Keller Crisp from Stanford, and of course returning sophomore Jarrett Garantano are battling for quarterback. If it's close, it's going to be Garantano, I believe, and I believe he's leading right now. And they're going to do a 3-headed rushing attack with Kyle Chandler, and we got a transfer from Michigan. See, not quite familiar with all these guys yet. Of course, Kyle Chandler, Tim Jordan, and Madre London. Madre London is transferring from Mississippi State. He's a big power back. That should be a good trio of running backs. There's probably just 1A through C. It's not like really first, second, third string. They're going to run by committee, it looks like. Wide receiver, of course, we got Jennings and Callaway's another big one. At tight end, Dominic Wood-Anderson is looking to be a force from what I'm hearing in preseason. And we're going to go ahead and go through their schedule real quick. West Virginia is going to be favored in that game. It's at a neutral site at Charlotte, but I'm going to go ahead and say West Virginia. Next, East Tennessee. They should win. They should beat UTEP. They got Florida at home. Dan Mullen's New Florida. I don't know exactly where they're at just yet. if they're going to beat them relatively soon, they got them early, they could potentially upset Florida there, but we're going to go with Florida. Okay, so we got 2-2. The next stretch is pretty tough. I believe they'll lose to Georgia, Auburn, and Alabama. I'm going to say they beat South Carolina, they beat Charlotte, they beat Kentucky. I'm going to give Missouri the win, second to last game, and then I say they beat Vanderbilt. So that's 6 wins with Missouri and their high-scoring offense that late in the year. Tennessee's defense could be prepared to play them, but I'm going to give Missouri the benefit of the doubt with Locke at quarterback. He's a pretty good player. Okay, moving up, speaking of Locke at quarterback, we're going to go to Mizzou. And let's see, Drew Lock, of course, that's the big guy at quarterback. He's big on a lot of NFL projection radar, all that good stuff. They've got 9 coming back on offense, 6 coming back on defense. I'd like them better if they had 9 back on defense and 6 on offense, because defensively they've been pretty weak the last few years. But one side on defense, they do have Terry Buckner coming back, who is healthy on the defensive line. He is going to be a force for them. He's going to be a big deal for Missouri this year and how well they do in the SEC East. Like I said, I got them at 3rd at this moment. I'm kind of flirting with swapping them up with Florida just because I don't know if Florida's ready just yet. But Dan Mullen's a good coach. I believe he's going to get that team back on schedule, which, that complicates everything for every other team, because you got Florida and Georgia, who both are going to be legitimate here in the coming years, I believe. Of course, the big story with the Missouri quarterback, Drew Lock. He is an absolute beast at quarterback. And let's see what we got on Drew Lock. Of course, he led the SEC with 3,964 passing yards. He was pretty much at 4,000 yards, 44 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. He's going to be a force. He's going to be tough to deal with for a lot of teams. And, as far as running back, I don't even know if it matters who the running back is. Demaria Crockett looks like he's a new starter coming in. He'll probably be effective just because their passing game is going to be so good. But, and like I said, we're talking about Beckner on defense. Let's see, they've got pretty much their whole linebacking core coming back. Both corners, they're replacing the safeties. Depending on how this goes, Coach Barry Odom as the coach, if he can coach these guys up, they could unseat Florida at number 2 and basically move into that number 2 position. And with Locke at quarterback, the only problem is Florida's defense, and that's what we're going to talk about. Okay, they'll beat Tennessee Martin. They should beat Wyoming. Purdue, they're on the road at Purdue, so for that reason I'm slightly leaning towards Purdue. But when you can score like Missouri, they could come out of Purdue with a W. They got Georgia at Georgia. They've played Georgia tough the last couple of years. I feel like this Georgia team, by game number 4, their defense is going to be clicking. I believe they're going to put everything on Locke's shoulders, and I don't believe he carries them through Georgia. That's just a tough game. At South Carolina, I feel like they'll outscore South Carolina. They'll lose at Alabama. They should beat Memphis, which won't be easy. Memphis has been known to put up some points. I believe they'll beat Kentucky. Florida, I'm slightly leaning towards Florida just because of their defense. Vanderbilt, I got them beating Vanderbilt. They should beat Tennessee. They should beat Arkansas. So let's see, we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 or 9 wins, which isn't bad. That's pretty good. 8 or 9 wins for Missouri. If you're a Missouri fan, you should take it. So Moving to number 2, we have Florida. Let's see what they've got coming back. We already know they're strong on defense, but officially they've got 10 coming back on offense, 6 coming back on defense. They're kind of like an Alabama or Georgia when it comes to defense. They're not returning as many, but the ones they are returning are going to be solid. So the ones that are filling in are basically guys who just need a couple games experience, and they're going to be fine. They're one of the better defensive teams in the SEC. Offensively, 10 starters. That's a pretty big deal. They're losing a couple of good wide receivers, but when you're in Florida, you're bringing in speed every year. They should be okay there. Felipe Franks will more than likely be the quarterback. You get Dan Mullen coming in as the coach. I feel like he's going to do great at Florida. He's good with quarterbacks. Felipe Franks is he's like a Dak Prescott type of guy. He's a big kid with a big arm. I believe Mullen will be able to facilitate him into this offense that he likes to run. And they may need a year before they really start clicking with Dan Mullen's system. So that's why they're at. I mean, I got them at 2 already, which, like I said, them and Missouri, you could swap them. I feel like they're pretty even based on everything. Missouri's got the better offense. Florida's got the best defense. So it's going to be a tough go at it. Of course, running backs. They've got Jordan Scarlett coming back. He could be a 1,000-yard rusher, and Florida overall always has good talent coming in. You know, looking at their defense, Marco Wilson, the cornerback, he's a returning starter. Inside linebacker David Reese, he's a good player. They got C.C. Jefferson, who's going to be the pass rusher. They're going to be good on the defensive line. It's going to be a really tough defense to score on in the SEC. The only thing that might hurt the defense, their offense has not been known to be very potent, but they've got some good. Teams can basically wear them down, is what I'm trying to get at, and late in the game the defense could start to bend a little bit just because they've been on the field practically the entire game. So you know that's pretty much what we're trying to say. So I'm gonna go ahead and run down their schedule real quick. Charleston Southern, that's a win. Kentucky, that's a win. I believe they beat Colorado State. They'll be favored at Tennessee. They should beat Tennessee this year. I believe they'll lose to Mississippi State. LSU, that's going to be one of those low-scoring, ugly games, but it is in Florida, so I'm going to go ahead and give Florida the benefit of the doubt. They should beat Vanderbilt. Got them losing to Georgia. Missouri's a toss-up game for me. I'm going to go ahead and say they win that one. South Carolina, they got South Carolina at home, so I feel they win that one. They should beat Idaho. And Florida State, it's a toss-up. That's probably the difference between 9 or 10 wins right there. By that time, I actually think Mullen will have Florida playing pretty good ball. So I'm going to go ahead and pick them in that game. So we're looking at 9 or 10 wins for Florida in Mullen's first year, which is going to be good enough for second in the East. And that, of course, leaves one more team. And Georgia Bulldogs, I got them winning the East this year. They've actually lost a little bit. They got pretty good on offense. They got 8 returning, and they're losing. They got 5 returning on defense, so they're losing 6 on defense. But They've done what I felt like Kirby Smart had a chance to do. They have basically turned into Bama of the East. They've lost these guys, but they've got enough talent coming in that all they need is a little bit of experience, and they're going to be fine in their new positions. He basically has 5 stars all over the roster already. I didn't believe they'd be able to do this quickly, but you got to give hats off to Kirby Smart. He's done a great job with this Georgia team. Of course, some of their key losses. The big one is Roquan Smith at inside linebacker, great player. Of course, Nick Chubb, Sony Michel at running back. Isaiah Wynn on the line, he was a good player. Javon Wims, wide receiver, another good player they're losing on offense. But they're just filling in. They've got some good recruits coming in to fill in at the wide receiver spot. They've got Terry Goodwin and Riley Ridley returning, both good wide receivers for Fromm. I believe Fromm is going to be better this year than he was last year. And he was pretty good last year, so that's no knock on him. They got, of course, another top recruit coming in at quarterback. I don't believe he's going to unseat Jake Fromm or anything. Justin Fields is his name. At running back, they've got a running back factory going on at Georgia, not quite to the extent of Alabama, especially due to some losses last year, but they do got DeAndre Swift, who I think could be as good as any of them, and of course Elijah Holyfield. He's a good tough runner. They have a freshman who came in this year, but he has gotten hurt, so I believe that he was going to be in that rotation. But I know they got a couple other guys who will be able to get on the field at that position. Offensive line looks like they've lost the right side of the line. They basically, from center over, they're covered, but they have talent in there coming in, so they're going to be just fine on in that position. That's not going to be a problem. Defense, they're gonna rush the quarter. They're going to get pressure on the quarterback. They're strong against the run. Natrez Patrick, senior inside linebacker's back. He's going to be probably the anchor in the middle of that defense. These guys are going to be tough for whoever they play this year. And we'll go back and just go through their schedule real quick. They start off with Austin Peay. That's a win. They go to South Carolina. To me, that's a win, even though a lot of people are picking South Carolina. I'm not doing that. I'm not biting. I believe they take care of South Carolina pretty easy. Middle Tennessee, I don't care who their quarterback is. I believe Stockstill will struggle against this defense. They go to Missouri. Missouri could give them a scare, could give them problems early on. I don't see this being a last-second win like it was a year or two ago. I believe Georgia will take care of business. They'll pull away in the third or fourth quarter. I'm going to go ahead and say Tennessee at home. They should be a win. They should beat Vanderbilt. They should beat LSU, Florida, Kentucky. They got Auburn at home November 10th. That'll be a tough game, but that will be a game that they will win in my estimation. Massachusetts will be a win. Then they got Georgia Tech at home. They should beat Georgia Tech with no problem. Georgia Tech's going to run that triple option. They run it wonderfully, but I don't believe they're going to be able to stop Georgia. And Georgia's defense is fast enough; they'll be able to defend that triple option pretty good. I don't see Georgia losing any games. Basically, I got them running the table. They're undefeated going into the SEC championship. They'll be one of the top 3 teams in the country going into that weekend. So we're going to switch gears and go to the West now, and we're going to start at the bottom. And the bottom team, I believe, this year is going to be Ole Miss. I just feel like they haven't had time to really recover from everything just yet. And with all that quarterback coach from last year, Hugh Freeze, and everything that went with that, I'm not saying Matt Luke's going to be a bad coach or he is a bad coach. I just believe Ole Miss is kind of they're kind of at a disadvantage. Of course, their quarterback Shea Patterson transferred to Michigan, and that hurt them pretty bad. So I've pretty much got them last on this side, which Arkansas hasn't been very good, and they may not be very good this year. But I'm actually taking a little bit of chance on that coach that they got coming in, and I'm going to say that he improves the team a little bit, at least enough to keep them off the bottom of the West, which may not be saying a whole lot. But back to Ole Miss real quick. They have 8 starters on offense returning, along with 4 on defense. That's huge. Had they had Shea Patterson coming back, that's probably maybe 2 spots up higher in the West, in my opinion. Excuse me. Losing him was a big deal. Of course, they lost Van Jefferson, a great wide receiver. He transferred. Not exactly sure where he went, but he has transferred. Of course, they lost Jordan Wilkins. He was a 1,000-yard rusher. Shea Patterson was their quarterback. This team may still be okay offensively. They got Jordan Tamua coming in at quarterback. He'll be a senior this year. He did complete 66% of his passes, and he didn't play too bad. So they might be okay at quarterback. Maybe a stretch picking Arkansas over them, but it's already written down, so I'm going to keep it the way it is. Defensively is where they may struggle, where they've lost, a lot of their starters on defense. And we'll see what Matt Luke's got planned for these guys and see what they do. But they're on the bottom as for now. Their schedule, let's see. They got Texas Tech that first weekend at a neutral site. It's in Houston, Texas, so it's basically a road game. I mean, they can call it a neutral site if they want to. It's not at Texas Tech, but it's in Texas Tech country. It's in Texas, so I'm not quite sure what to. You know what? I believe they're going to beat Texas Tech. I don't think Texas Tech is that good this year. They should beat Southern Illinois. They'll lose to Alabama. They should beat Kent State. I believe they'll lose to LSU. Louisiana Monroe, they should beat them, but it wouldn't surprise me if they lost. Arkansas, I got Arkansas ahead of them, so I'm going to pick Arkansas. They'll lose to Auburn. I believe they'll lose to South Carolina. Let's see. A&M, I believe they'll lose to A&M too. So that's 6 losses. They'll beat Vanderbilt, and they'll lose to Mississippi State. So we're looking at about 6-6. So they should qualify for a bowl game, but they're not going to do too well after that. And we'll see what they do. We'll see what Matt Luke is able to do in the years to come with them. Okay, and let's see. We're going to get to Arkansas. They got a new coach in Chad Morris. He's getting his opportunity. We'll see what he does. I've got them finishing second to last in the West, which it's a tough division within the conference. So they could be a good team. It's just they're playing in a tough conference in the division, a tough division within the conference. So they've got 6 returning on offense, 6 on defense. So it's a little bit of balance there anyway. They've got pretty much their whole offensive line for the most part coming back. They got a sophomore coming in at quarterback at Cole Kelly. Of course, they're losing Austin Allen, who basically he flopped his senior year. He had a big junior year, and I'm sure Hog fans were pretty optimistic about what he could do, but it didn't end up being very much for his senior year, so that kind of hurt them. Some of the key guys they got coming back On defense, they got DeJohn Harris at linebacker and McTelvin Agam on the defensive line. So, 7 coming back on defense. Hopefully their defense can play better this year. That's what I'm counting on. I'm counting on a little more balance. They do have a returning running back in Devois Wiley, who should be a pretty good player. He had about 600 yards last year, averaging about 4.5 a carry, along with 7 touchdowns. And they're going to want to run the ball because Arkansas has had a lot of size on the line in the last few years. I don't know a lot about quarterback Cole Kelly, so we'll see. He's a big kid at 6'7", 263 pounds from Lafayette, Louisiana. So looks like he's going to be a big guy. Hopefully he can get the job done for the Hogs this year. We'll go ahead and go over their schedule. They should beat Eastern Illinois. They should beat Colorado State. They should beat North Texas. I got them losing to Auburn. I got them losing to A&M, Bama. I'm actually going to pick them against Ole Miss. Tulsa. They should beat Tulsa. Vanderbilt. They should beat Vanderbilt, I believe. They got Vanderbilt at home. LSU, between LSU and Arkansas, they always play each other tough. I'm going to go with LSU. I believe they'll lose to Mississippi State, and I believe they'll lose to Missouri. So we're looking at 6-6 again. So the only thing keeping them over Ole Miss is the head-to-head game. So those two could flip very easily if Ole Miss is able to beat Arkansas on the road, which on the road is the reason why I got Arkansas winning. And we'll see how this goes. Arkansas is still relatively young, so they could have a turnaround depending on how Matt Luke does. Moving on up, we got LSU in the middle of the pack in the West, basically. Actually, yeah, they're pretty much in the middle. Just a second. A&M is actually before LSU, so we're going to go ahead and do A&M real quick. Now, about a month ago, I might have A&M even higher, maybe ahead of LSU or maybe even ahead of Mississippi State with Jimbo Fisher. Jimbo Fisher as coach. But now we're getting all these reports about different things happening with this team, and you know how these things kind of wear on a team, and it kills momentum, and the season hasn't even gotten started yet. So this kind of puts a crimp in my picks in a way, because I believe Jimbo Fisher can do really well with Texas A&M, and even if there was no drama this year, not really so much this year, but moving forward, I would say I feel like he's going to be able to recruit really well. He's got connections in Florida, and with A&M being in Texas, Texas is a huge state to recruit. So much talent coming out of Texas. You've got players from the West Coast in California, which is another great state to recruit in. There's guys who are in those states in the West who want to play in the SEC, but they don't want to come all the way to the East Coast to do it. And A&M is a good landing spot, which is why I was surprised Sumlin wasn't able to be more successful at A&M. But Fisher, with his resume and everything and what he did at Florida State, winning the championship there, he's set up to really, really do well at Texas A&M. So, let's just see how all this stuff shakes out. If I was A&M, I'd do like Ohio State, and I'd get this guy suspended, sacrifice this season, because you could win some championships here in the next 10, 15 years. if this guy is able to stay and you're able to shake off basically what happened. And all this high moral stuff that people are going to say, oh, but he shouldn't have done this and that and yada yada yada. I know there's a lot of cheating that goes on in college football. We all know it. We know how hard it is to get a good coach and keep a good coach. So unless he just is it's something that you just can't get around, then I'd do everything I could to keep him if I was Texas A&M. Now, if he goes, there's no telling where this program could wind up, because they're in a good spot where a decent coach or a halfway good coach could do good at A&M if he makes the right decisions. But if you've got an exceptional coach with a track record like Fisher, you can absolutely blow it up at A&M. So let's get back on the team real quick. Let's see what they got. They got 8 returning on offense, 7 returning on defense. So they're set up really nicely. At quarterback, they got Nick Starkel. He's just a sophomore. He threw for about 80 to 1,800 yards last year, but one thing that A&M has is a lot of speed at wide receiver. They usually have a scat back at running back. They're going to run, of course. Fisher's going to bring over his philosophy and all that stuff for as far as offense is concerned. They're set up to be really good. And like I said, the only thing that's got me putting them behind LSU is the turmoil that's going on right now. If it wasn't for that, I'd probably have them 2 spots up at third in the West, just above Mississippi State. But of course, they did lose Christian Kirk. He's a speedster at wide receiver. Amari Watts at safety. Another speedster, Ratley, and defensive tackle Henderson, a good player, and a good running back, Keith Ford. So, they're going to be they got talent. They got plenty coming back on both sides of the ball. They could be dangerous. They could end up making a push in this conference, but it's just hard to say right now. With 8 starters coming back on offense, that's huge. 7 on defense. They've been known to be able to get pressure on the quarterback. So it's a good team with some turmoil. So it's hard to say what they're going to do. But I'm going to go through their schedule real quick. They'll beat Northwestern State. I believe Clemson comes into town and beats them. They'll beat Louisiana Monroe. They'll lose to Alabama. They should beat Arkansas. They should beat Kentucky. With everything going on, I got them going to South Carolina and losing. I believe they'll lose to Mississippi State and Auburn. They'll beat Ole Miss. They'll beat UAB. They'll beat Ole Miss. They'll beat UAB. And they'll lose to LSU. So, once again, they're right around. Everybody's just right around that 6 or 7 loss area. So, this conference this division is tough. The West is tough in the SEC. Any one of those 4 teams or 3 teams that I've talked about, and 4 including LSU, they could wind up at any of the other spots. So it's funny how this division works. Okay, moving on one up to LSU. Of course, Ed Orgeron. He seems like the perfect fit at coach there, but is he a good enough coach for LSU? I don't know. I like the guy. He seems like a really good guy, but LSU, they're a winning tradition in LSU. They fired Les Miles, a coach who's won like 80-something% of his games. So the standard is high, and if you're going off of that standard, then my answer is no. Orgeron may not be. It's not may not. If you're going off of that standard, Orgeron is not good enough. He is not a good enough coach. He's a Louisiana guy. He's a good dude, but you're hired to win football games at LSU. That's just the way it goes. They've got 5-5 as far as defense and offense returners. They're replacing quarterback, which, let's see, they got Miles Brennan coming in. And I don't know much about this guy. He needs to be good. I do know that. Let's see. Matt Canada is his offensive coordinator. Let's see. See if they got anything on this quarterback. God. I don't really see anything about him. Miles Brennan, he's a sophomore. He was supposed to take firm hold of the job last year from Danny Edling, but as the spring progressed, there was little separation. So apparently he was a big recruit coming in, and Edling beat him out. Edling was not that good of a quarterback. So hopefully this kid just needed 1 year to come in and get settled in, and maybe he's a good quarterback. But LSU always has a good explosive defense. They've always got good athletes at wide receiver and running back. They're always physical on both sides of the ball on the line. They pretty much are never any good at quarterback. And that, in all honesty, is the one thing that keeps them from competing to win the West, is that they're inadequate at quarterback. If this Brennan kid is good and he can come in and really play quarterback, then they may have a shot. Now, the guy they got as backup is a freshman, Lowell Nakrisi. I don't know his name. It's probably a French name. He's probably a Louisiana kid. Maybe he's a big star. Maybe he's a big recruit. Maybe he comes in at some point and he gives them a spark that catapults the team. Even if he does catapult them, I don't see him catapulting them any higher than a win over maybe Mississippi State. I feel like Auburn and Bama are, pretty much far and away ahead in the West this year. Let's see, they've got Forster Moreau coming back at tight end. He's a senior, should be a good player. It looks like they've only lost 2 offensive linemen, so they'll be good on the line. They lost 2 out of 3 defensive line, but they're going to be able to replace their defensive linemen, I believe. They're going to be competent on defense, just like they always are. The question is going to fall back on how good is the quarterback play going to be. Is it going to be enough to catapult them any further than what anyone has them picked to be? So going over LSU's schedule, we're really quick here. They got Miami September 2nd and Arlington, Texas. That is an actual true neutral game right there. I believe Miami's too good for them at this point. Miami should win. They should beat Southeast Louisiana. I believe they will lose. They'll lose to Auburn. They should beat Louisiana Tech. They should beat Ole Miss. I got them losing to Florida because they're going to Florida. They'll lose to Georgia. They'll lose to Mississippi State. They'll lose to Alabama. I got them beating Arkansas, Rice, and A&M. Once again, about 6 wins. You're looking at about 6 wins right there again. If they upset somebody, that's 7. But 6 wins. Honestly, we could seriously have like a 4 or 5 team tie in the West. I mean, everybody's even with the exception of the 2 teams who are ahead of everybody else. Which brings me to Auburn. They're returning 7 on offense, 6 on defense. Of course, their big loss on offense is Kerryon Johnson, and big reason why, in my opinion, is why they beat Alabama last year. Very good player. Of course, they have their stud at quarterback, Stidman, coming back. He threw for about 3,200 yards last year. I feel like he's going to do the same this year. They've got their wide receiving core intact. They did take a hit on the offensive line. They lost about 4 out of the 5 starters. And for that reason, a lot of people are a little bit down on Auburn. Me personally, I'm not down on them. I feel like they're one of those SEC teams that brings in talent year after year. They're going to have some inexperience on the line, but after a few games, I think they'll be fine. I believe Stidman will be able to carry them through those few games, and like I said, I feel like they're going to be just fine. Same thing on defense. Their defensive line is intact. They got a safety, cornerback, and an inside linebacker returning on defense. Three experienced players to anchor each level, and the entire defensive line, with the exception of one defensive end, they've lost to graduation. So I believe spread over that defense, they're going to be just fine. Auburn's going to be tough to contend with once again this year. Some of the other losses, in addition to Kerryon Johnson, the defensive lineman Jeff Holland, 10 sacks. That's a pretty big piece to the defense. But I feel like with the experience on that line and their ability to recruit, I think they're going to be just fine on the defensive line. Of course, they've got Derek Brown coming back, he's a top prospect coming into the draft this next season. So they got him anchoring that line. They're going to be just fine. Of course, they lost pretty much most of their offensive line. Safety Trey Matthews, 3-year starter. That's going to be a big hit. Of course, on offense, you got Jared Stidman, running back. Looks like Cam Martin. He did get some playing time last year. They got freshman Jatarvius Whitlow. He was a top rated guy coming in, so they should be okay at the running back position. Basically, Auburn is going to be just as good, maybe a notch lower at first, but I feel like by season's ends they're going to be clicking on all cylinders, and Auburn's going to be a very tough team. Going through their schedule, they got the first neutral game in Atlanta against Washington. Washington is going to begin the season as a top 10 team, maybe even top 5. I'm not positive on that, but this is a game a lot of people are picking Auburn to lose. It is early, which would be the time to catch Auburn, but I'm not picking Auburn to lose this game. I believe they will win a tight game against Washington in Atlanta. It's going to be one of the top games to watch that weekend, which it's a big weekend for football. I'll put out a video later this week, or it's still Saturday, so next week I'll have a video come out previewing the games next week before Saturday, or actually before Thursday, because I think we got a few games Thursday as well. But it's a big weekend in college football. I'm a huge fan. I'm really looking forward to it. But I got Auburn beating Washington that day. Like I said, it's going to be a tough game. It's not going to be easy by any means. It could be one of those games that comes down to the last drive or two. They either have to stop Washington or they have to put a score on the board to win the game. I'm looking at less than a score. It's going to be 3 to 7 point game. It's going to be that good of a ball game. But it's a close call, but I'm leaning with Auburn this year. I really believe they're going to be a good team. They're going to beat Alabama State. They'll beat LSU. They'll beat Arkansas. They'll beat Southern Miss. They'll beat Mississippi State. They'll beat Tennessee. They'll beat Ole Miss. They'll beat A&M. They got Georgia November 10th. I believe both teams will be 9-0 going into that game. They'll be going to Georgia, but I'm picking Georgia to beat them. I believe Georgia's a little bit better. That's not a knock on Auburn, because Georgia's just that good. They're just a good team. Kirby Smart's got those Bulldogs clicking right now. So they'll lose that game. They'll beat Liberty, and I got them going to Alabama and losing a close, hard-fought game. Of course, their freshman quarterback, Tua, will be the difference between this game and the last game. Auburn played Hurts last year, and they did a good job defending him. But with it being on the road at Alabama and them beating Alabama this year, Saban will have Bama ready. They'll come in prepared to win this game, and of course, they got revenge on their minds. It's hard to beat a Saban coach team 2 years in a row. So for those reasons, I got Auburn losing, and I've got a firm 10-2. I believe they will win 10 games. They'll lose to Georgia and Alabama, 2 of the best teams in the country, and that's basically it. So that leads us to the number 1 team in the West this year, which is Alabama. And let's see, they have 7 returning on offense, 3 returning on defense. None of that matters. They are filling in all their spots with 5-star players over the course of the last 3 years. So every player that's coming onto that defense is going to be good. And with 7 on offense, they're still going to be good on offense. They got 2 good quarterbacks. Of course, I believe Tua Tagovailoa. I can't really say the guy's name. Tagovailoa, maybe. I'm just going to call him Tua because I can pronounce that without any issue, and I don't want to say the kid's name wrong. So Tua at quarterback. Of course, it's a controversy between Tua and Hurts. Everybody says Hurts was 26-2 as starting quarterback at Alabama, and that's great. And I get that, and I understand why people would say he should start. Because of that, my take is this: they are so good everywhere else that the one flaw he has that Tua has over him does not even come into play in 99% of the games they play. So for that reason, they are able to win despite the fact that he's not as good as in the passing game, going through his progressions and everything, which he doesn't need to be in 99% of the games. Until you play a Georgia or a Clemson or somebody like that is the only time you're going to need Tua, really. But if you're Tua, you deserve to start because he doesn't run like Hurts, but he's very mobile for a quarterback. He's not like a running back. He actually is kind of like a running back at quarterback. The only difference is he's not quite as powerful and as big as Jalen Hurts, which makes him not as good of a runner, but he's so much better in the dropping back and going through his progressions and throwing the ball. He's going to have more interceptions. He doesn't protect the ball as well maybe as Hurts, but there's a bigger upside. He takes more chances, but the more he plays, the better he's going to get at that. Hurts, he didn't force the ball. He'd take off running. A lot of times he'd get a first down. Tua is capable of doing the same thing. The difference is he's going to have a little more confidence in his arm, and he's going to take those chances with those throws and try to squeeze them into spots where maybe he shouldn't. But the upside is bigger with Tua. Of course, I don't think it's going to matter. They're going to be so good running the ball. Damian Harris and Najee Harris, both at running back. There is no relation, by the way. Both very good running backs. And then they're going to have some more kids come off the bench who can run the ball as well. They always do. With 7 coming back on offense, they're basically going to need to replace Calvin Ridley at wide receiver. But they got some 5 stars coming up at wide receiver who are going to be just fine. They're going to be good. Defense is the big one. You maybe say somebody could catch them early because they have all these new defensive starters. Of course, you got Isaiah Buggs, Raekwon Davis on the line, 2 good players on the line. Then you got outside linebacker Anthony Jennings, who came in and played quite a bit last year. They're going to be solid, but they lost some really good players on defense, but they got some really good players filling in. So they're going to be good. They're going to be just fine. If they were playing Auburn at the first of the season, I actually would probably pick Auburn to beat them. But the fact that they got them late and Tua will be able to develop nicely at quarterback, they're going to be the same juggernaut that comes into the SEC West every season, and they're going to be tough to beat. So I'm going to go ahead and go over their schedule really quickly here. They're going to play Louisville and Orlando at the neutral site. They'll beat Louisville. I don't see anything Louisville's got that scares me, to be honest. They'll beat Arkansas State. They'll beat Ole Miss. They got A&M at home. I believe they'll beat A&M. By the 4th game, the defense should be getting the team cohesion and everything in order by then. They'll beat Arkansas. They'll beat Missouri. They'll beat Tennessee. They'll beat LSU. Mississippi State at home. Mississippi State usually gives them a tough game. With it being at home, I believe they will beat Mississippi State this year. They'll beat the Citadel. And Auburn, like I said, they will beat Auburn at home. And I believe they run the table. We're going to have 2 undefeated teams going in the SEC title game. Before I talk about the SEC title game, I'm going to go back. The 3rd team in the West, I apologize, I skipped Mississippi State, but we're going to go ahead and go over them real quick here. Okay, Mississippi State, of course, they've got a new coach in Joe Moorhead, offensive coordinator from Penn State. He should be a he's a good coach. They've got 9 coming back on offense, 10 coming back on, 9 offense, 7 on defense. So they've got a really good foundation coming back. They didn't lose their coach because he wasn't any good. They lost him because he basically took a better job. They got Arius Williams coming back, who rushed for 1,100 yards. Of course, their big star coming back is Nick Fitzgerald, quarterback. He's been a very good player the last few years. This team could probably win other conferences. This is going to be a good Bulldog team this year, with all these returning starters that they have coming back. This is a team that Mullen has built. I look for them to be every bit as good as they were last year, and in some respect they may even be better. I don't know how good of a head coach Moorhead will be. He's got a lot of steam on his side. A lot of people really like Joe Moorhead. They believe he's going to do a great job at Mississippi State. I personally do not believe he's as good of a coach as Dan Mullen, but he might not have to be. If he can keep rebuilding on what this team has, he may come out okay with this. But he's in a tough conference. He's going to have some tough games. Like I said, Fitzgerald is the main guy. You can win games with great players. And Fitzgerald is definitely a great player. And we're going to go through their schedule real quick here. Stephen F. Austin is a win. Kansas State's a win. Louisiana Lafayette's a win. They should beat Kentucky. They got Florida at home. I feel like they beat Florida at home. They're going to lose to Auburn. They'll beat LSU. They'll beat A&M. I believe they'll beat A&M. They'll beat Louisiana Tech. They'll lose to Alabama. And they'll beat Arkansas, and they'll beat Ole Miss. So I basically got them losing 2 games. 2, maybe 3 games. They could slip up against LSU or A&M. 2 or 3 games, but for the most part, I see a 9 or 10 win team here. So, that's a pretty good season for Moorhead in his first year at Mississippi State. Of course, he's got Bob Shoop at defensive coordinator, who he worked with at Penn State, and Shoop did a good job there. He may be able to do a good job under Moorhead, a better job than he did at Tennessee, which I don't hold Shoop entirely responsible for that whole debacle in Tennessee. So he could probably rebound with Mississippi State. We'll see how it goes. Okay. Anyway, we've made it to the SEC title game. Georgia and Alabama, I believe they both will come into this game undefeated. This will essentially be a playoff game for the most part. Maybe not. We'll see how that goes. But this is a tough one to call. But Bama barely beat Georgia last year. That was a big league call to put start Tua in the second half against Georgia. Most coaches in the nation would not have done that, but that is why they pay Nick Saban the big bucks. I believe that had Georgia had amped time to prepare for Tua, and they knew he was going to start from the get-go, I feel like Georgia wins that game. I feel like Georgia is able to devise game plans to basically combat whatever it is that they need to combat. You saw that in the turnaround from when they lost to Georgia in the regular season. They played them in the SEC championship last year, and they completely dominated them for the most part in that game. They said their defense was perfect. By the end of this season, Georgia's defense is going to be thumping. I believe they're going to be absolutely thumping. And offensively, I believe Fromm is going to be he's going to be a big league quarterback this year. I think he's going to have one of the better years out of the quarterbacks in the SEC. And by the time that Bama game rolls around, he will have had pretty much 2 full seasons under his belt. And he'll be able to work the outside against Alabama. And Swift will be, this is all barring health, of course. They need to come in healthy. Swift will be playing well. Tua, of course, is going to be a Heisman candidate. He's going to be playing well as well. Alabama's defense will be where it needs to be by the time this game starts. I don't see a huge, I don't really see a huge scoring game here, but I believe that Georgia is they're going to pull this out barely. I'm going to say, it's hard. I don't see it going into the 30s unless we have like an overtime game like we did last year. So I'm going to opt against overtime. And I am going to say Georgia pulls this game out. Let's see. 27-23. It's going to be a tight game. It's going to be that close of a game. And I can see Georgia having to score sometime in the late last minute or so in order to pull this out, and they'll win this game 27-23. I don't know why that score that seems like the score to stick in mind, but there we have it. We got the SEC done. I went through pretty much every team in depth. If anyone agrees or disagrees, please let me know. Let's get some good conversation going on this one. I know this video pretty much went a little ways, and you know, I apologize for the long video, the long-winded video. I just wanted to get a good in-depth preview of the SEC because I know most of the people I know are SEC fans of some sort. So I hope you enjoyed. I'm thinking about going ahead and getting up my playoff predictions right now. I know what I want. I know what I'm going to do off the top of my head right now. So I'm going to get that, get a separate video for that. I'll probably go ahead and start that right now if you want to be honest about it. But I'm going to do that after this video. But there we have it. We've got Georgia over Alabama in the SEC championship game. So we know Georgia's in the playoffs based on my picks anyway. And I hope you guys enjoyed again. Please like the video, share if there's something you agreed or disagree with. Please just comment in the comments. Let me know. I'd love to discuss it and see what we got. See what kind of debates we can get going with it. I appreciate you guys watching, and you know, keep an eye out for the playoff picks, which will probably go up a little later today. Thanks again, guys, and everybody have a wonderful rest of the weekend. Like, subscribe, and share. Let's get some traffic and some stuff going on the video. And this is Coach Carroll from SportsBanter38, and I am out.